come to the tiny country of Benin in West Africa because it's the only country in the world that recognises voodoo as an official religion.
Every year, thousands of children are initiated into voodoo. But for many poor families, the cost can be unbearably high, as parents are forced to sell their children to repay voodoo debts. We're in the tiny West African country of Benin, where 2/3 of the population worship voodoo gods. Here in Segbahe, an ancient law enforcement ritual is underway. It's a scene that's been played out across Benin for many hundreds of years.
These are the Zangbeto, which are meant to be the guardian spirits. They're like the voodoo police force, and they were used traditionally to keep order in the village.
The villagers say these whirling haystacks are to be feared. They believe they're inhabited by voodoo spirits, always on the lookout for wrongdoers. Anyone they catch causing trouble in the village will be punished. Our guide, Martine de Souza, is a liberal voodoo priestess.
Do people still believe this?
Yes, of course.
This is very real for people.
Yes, it's very real. They still believe in, because voodoo is in our everyday life. Voodoo keeps eyes on everybody. Voodoo is very important. Even without voodoo, we could not be walking, because we are walking on the land, which is voodoo.
And do you think today people would prefer the Zangbeto here to keep order, or the modern police force?
I prefer Zangbeto because the police, we can see them. Actually, we know who they are, and but for the spirit, we don't know who they are. We are more afraid of Zangbeto, and we respect them more than police.
Yeah.
This elaborate ritual provides many surprises. Under each haystack are found many different manifestations of voodoo spirits, some more frightening and more real than others. From a young age, children are taught to fear voodoo as a mysterious and powerful force. Our guide tells us voodoo first emerged in this part of West Africa more than 10,000 years ago.
We're now heading north to Abomey, which is the ancient royal capital of Benin, and it still remains a very strong centre of voodoo practice.
While some voodoo rituals are very public, others are only performed in private.
So after some driving around, we've come to the outskirts of Abomey, and inside here we're told is going to be a special ceremony.
Some ceremonies are designed to bring good fortune, but others aim to harness voodoo's power to hurt rivals and enemies. This is a rarely filmed ritual. I'm told it's voodoo self-defense and aims to kill anyone trying to hurt the people in this room. Tradition demands everyone present must remove their shirt.
The last song here was to tell the spirits what to do, to send the message to go and kill somebody.
Martine tells me the idea of sacrifice is central to voodoo belief. In this ceremony, the spirits are offered fresh animal blood.
All the people in this room, I'm told, are witches, and their song is all witches are happy when they taste the blood of the sacrificed animal.
The voodoo priest eats the raw, congealed goat's blood to enhance his power. As the ceremony ends, gunpowder is burned to dispel the evil spirits from the shrine. Outside, children sing a song of welcome, but it's been unsettling to see them take part in what is effectively a ritual for murder.
What was the role of the children in the ceremony then?
They are all witches at different levels. That's why they all have to participate. And it's also for them to be learning.
Are they being taught about voodoo all the time, or do they go to somewhere special to learn?
When they reach a certain level, they'll have a very specific training.
I'm told that training takes place in what are called voodoo convents, and there are thousands of them in villages across the country. So this is one of the oldest voodoo shrines and convents in the Burma. Gin is poured to appease the voodoo spirits. A series of blessings and offerings to the spirits as we enter the area. Here, children are taught voodoo's secrets. We've been invited in to meet the chief trainer and the chief priest, and a stream of these young children just walked in, and some of them looked to me to be possibly 2, even 1 years old, and the one child sitting on the chair, I'm told, is a high priest because she has a big spirit. Na is the high priestess here. She tells me for voodoo to survive, it needs new recruits. It needs children. So the children who are trained here in the convent, once they leave, they are seen to be powerful by the communities, and they continue the religion of voodoo outside here, and then when the older people die here, they'll come into the shrine and take the positions. She told me none of the children go to school while at the convent. I was intrigued by the young girl on the stool. Hello, bonsoir. Na told me her name is Mirabelle. She's 3 years old. This is Mirabelle's mother. Now, clearly Mirabelle, even to the untrained eye, looks like she's mentally handicapped. Why did you bring Mirabelle here? Why not to a doctor? She didn't have money to go and take her to a hospital. So they went to a diviner and they realised that the problem needed voodoo attention. Do you still have to pay, though, for the initiation here for Mirabelle? It will cost her about £200, 5 years of her earnings, to pay for Mirabelle's initiation. That's a lot of money to pay. What happens if you can't pay? If she can't find the money, and she said she doesn't know how she's going to find that money, then she'll stay in the temple forever and serve the temple. We're interrupted by the priestess. She seemed uncomfortable with our inquiries about Mirabelle's future and the cost of her stay. What's happening there, Martin? We're told now that it's time to stop talking to the woman about this child, and we should probably do something else right now by the voodoo priests. Okay. Thank you. Merci. Voodoo demands donations for every ceremony. It's starting to feel like a business. And every ceremony is sealed with alcohol. In this case, even for little Mirabelle. Unable to afford proper health care for her disabled daughter, her mother turned to voodoo out of desperation. But it's a high price to pay. Benin is cripplingly poor. The UN says that more than half the population scrape by on less than £1 a day. We're now heading further north into one of the poorest parts of Benin. We've come to the village of Djedjbe to speak to a woman who's in debt to voodoo. Her name is Adonissi, and I meet her with her extended family. They explained how she owes a huge sum to voodoo for her child. 5 of her children had died young, so she sought voodoo's help with her last pregnancy. But if the child survived, it would have to be given to voodoo and initiated at her expense. When the child was born, she felt she didn't have enough money to pay for the very expensive voodoo ceremonies when the child is taken to voodoo for initiation, so she refused. And then voodoo priests came to her and actually took the child by force to the voodoo shrine. The priests said they'd release the child if Adonissi agreed to pay for her initiation. She said she couldn't negotiate because she was afraid the spirits would kill her child. How much money do you have to pay for the ceremonies? She's borrowing money to pay for the initiation. Adonissi is saying that the ceremony will cost about 150,000 Central African francs. That's about £200. Now, she earns about 12 pence a day, she says, collecting firewood, and her husband is unemployed. So at that rate, it would take them many years, about 5 years, to pay for the ceremony. She's saying that if I don't find the money to pay for the ceremonies, then the child will stay in the convent forever. Mortal fear of voodoo spirits stops believers challenging these rules. This is in fact a shrine where her daughter is being kept, which is just across the road from her house. Seems quite extraordinary, I've got to say, but anyway. Once again, the spirits are appeased with offerings of gin and coins. It's an entrance fee Adonissi can't normally afford, but we pay and she slips into the back of the crowd of assembling devotees. To come into the voodoo convent, we've just made 2 very small donations, but it's the equivalent of at least 2 months' firewood collection for Adonissi. 3 voodoo initiates leave their sacred quarters to come and greet us. In the 5 months since she's been here, Adonissi has not been allowed to speak with her daughter, nor will she until her daughter leaves the convent. The small girl, that's the one the mother's just pointed out to me, is her daughter. This is the convent's chief voodoo priest. He said the money doesn't go to him. It's used to buy expensive ceremonial ingredients, such as gin, goats and jewellery. Do you think, as the head of the convent, that it's right that when people are facing so much hardship in getting the money to pay for their children, do you think it's right that this continues? What led to the laughter then was he was saying, what's he doing? Is he asking me to stop voodoo? Is he asking me to stop initiating people? No, we can't do that. We belong to voodoo. And when voodoo demands something of you, you can't deny it. You have to go through with the ceremonies. While here, Adonissi's daughter isn't allowed to have a name. She's considered dead, to be reborn only after the ceremonies have been paid for. Voodoo's practiced all over Benin, but its demands are forcing some families to take drastic action.
One of the ways families deal with the extreme poverty here in Benin is to send their children away from home to find work. And we're going to a part of the country further north here where this is a very common practice.
Arid land, rapid population growth and poor education have created Benin's crushing poverty. But it's becoming clear to me that the cost of voodoo often makes it worse. As well as being a voodoo priestess, Martine is a child rights activist who wants to stop children being trafficked for money.
Here they have many wives, a lot of children, and they are very poor. So to solve their problems, they prefer to send the child away.
And what do you try and do out here?
Up here, I'm trying to do public awareness. Most of this population, they know nothing about the child mistreatment.
I've been told that voodoo initiation often ends a child's formal education because the parents can't then afford to keep sending them to school.
We were just driving past and we noticed it looks like an open-air school, so we've come in to have a look.
Only 1/3 of Benin's people can read and write, one of the lowest literacy rates in West Africa. Yet some parents still spend money on voodoo instead of school.
C'est bon? Un bon pour elle.
The school's headmaster, Jonas, told me these children are outside because there aren't enough classrooms. He said primary school is free, but most parents still struggle to educate their children. Even though it only costs them £5 a year for the equipment, they don't have the money for the uniforms and for the bags and for the stationery. The only reason these children have bags is because it was given to them by UNICEF. Jonas said the cost of voodoo made poverty worse. Many parents prefer to send their children away to work because it's the poverty, they need the money, and they want to send the children away so they can make money to buy a car, to live, and even to pay for ceremonies, for voodoo ceremonies. So you mean that the parents, some parents, have to send their children away for work to pay for voodoo ceremonies? He confirmed that some parents send their children away to work to pay for expensive rituals. That night we go to a nearby village. Martine has a message for the villagers.
Martine's showing the entire village a film about child trafficking and what happens to children when they leave the families and are exposed to abuse. She's trying to send out a warning to them to stop doing it.
The film shows the story of a young girl sold by her parents and sent to work in the city. The message is clear, yet I find that even a public awareness film in Benin doesn't escape voodoo's influence.
Her little friend comes from the village to save her with the assistance of the mermaid god, another of the voodoo spirits. Martine's asking children to come forward from the crowd and share with all the other children and the village their experiences from being forced to work both in Benin and outside the country.
Christine told me when she was just 14, her parents effectively sold her to work as a servant for a trader in the main city of Cotonou.
Christine says it was very difficult for me. I was alone, I was being beaten up, I wasn't getting paid any money. All I could think of was home, until eventually my parents did actually send someone to come and get me. But that was after 4.5 years.
Many of the children told similar stories.
Tobias here is now 13 years old. He said he was sold to a man who took him to Nigeria, where he was kept for a year breaking stones in a quarry. They weren't fed and they were beaten badly if they didn't work hard enough.
These were the scars from one such beating. But, he said, he was one of the lucky ones.
A lot of children actually died in these quarries. He knows, he saw them, and all they did was let the parents know that the boy was dead.
UNICEF says every year in Benin, 40,000 children are sold into what amounts to little more than slavery, many to pay for voodoo. I've come to the capital, Porto Novo, to track down some of those behind the trade.
So after some work we finally found this place, and it's a very nondescript, tucked away down a back street. You wouldn't even know it was here, but we're told this is a major centre of child trafficking and placement for labour. Bonjour.
Eric Abu is a people broker and seems surprisingly happy to talk. He showed me his logbook of trafficked children. The last entry was just this month.
Togolese. Eric has just brought out dozens of photographs of all the people, the girls particularly, who've gone through this place, and he says that over the years we've placed or trafficked more than 3,000 children.
He told me there are various reasons why employers preferred children to adults.
He says it falls into a couple of categories where they either want the children because they can train them well, or if they've got a bad temper, they can't beat an older person, so they'd prefer to take a child Eric, we've been in places where parents are struggling to pay for voodoo ceremonies. What connection is there, do you think, between the parents who need to place their children and them having to pay for ceremonies?
Eric told me in many cases the money goes directly to voodoo priests because the families need to pay for expensive voodoo ceremonies. Back in Cotonou, we hear of a project that helps victims of the trade.
Okay, we've come to a Christian centre which takes care of children who've been saved from trafficking, and that includes children who've been saved from voodoo convents.
Most children here have been rescued from forced labour, but I'm told there are also children here who've been freed from voodoo convents. I was introduced to Emma, who's 16. She's traumatised by what happened just a few months ago.
Emma's been brought up a Christian, her family's all Christian, but she was intrigued by the sound of the voodoo drums. She went into the convent, and that's where she says she was possessed. She was taken over by a trance.
She said she was there 5 days. All she remembers is the people in the convent wanted to keep her there to perform ceremonies. After her family reported her missing, she was rescued by the police.
How do you feel personally about voodoo?
She's reluctant to give details.
She says that straight after she left the convent, she still felt something about voodoo, but she doesn't really want to say what it is.
Emma's reticence is unsurprising. We've heard that anyone admitted to a convent is sworn to secrecy about the rituals. Betrayal risks retribution by the voodoo gods. It's the next day in Cotonou, and we've been invited to another voodoo service. Voodoo dominates the lives of believers through promises of prosperity and fear of ill fortune. We found it ruled by a hierarchy blind to the pressure that its extreme costs inflict on many families. I've come to the shrine of one of the most influential voodoo priests to find out if this religion can adapt and stop its shocking impact on children. Gwendahu Innocent Joseph Syriac is a top member of the voodoo clergy.
One thing we've been looking at is the cost of ceremonies, of voodoo ceremonies. They're obviously very important, but they cost people a lot of money in a country which is very poor. Is that right, that those voodoo ceremonies cost so much?
The priest told me that voodoo initiation is like going to university. It's a spiritual education and people must pay for it.
Is that right, though, where families in the countryside struggle? They just don't have the money to pay, and those children are chosen by voodoo, they say, they believe. You're saying that really it's the fault of the parents, that if when the child was born, they would have known that child was to be dedicated to voodoo, and they should have prepared bit by bit for the voodoo ceremony.
To thrive, voodoo needs a constant stream of new recruits, but its excessive costs are destroying families and robbing many children of their future.
Another unreported world investigation at the same time next week.